Thank you, and thank Powell's and Portland for having us here. It's really an extraordinary pleasure to be here tonight and among friends. Last night we were doing the same sort of thing at Evergreen State College and looking around the group, and of course that was Rachel's college. And I thought back last night to 29 years prior to that when we were sitting around our home with friends at a party, and the party got quieter and more quiet because everybody was timing Cindy's contractions. And 29 days and about, I don't know, 14 hours. 29 years and 14 hours ago, Rachel was born. So this is her birthday. She'd be 29 years old today.
Thank you for being here for the birthday party.
And you know, Rachel was a treasure to us, as all our kids were. You know, a lot of people say I had an extraordinary daughter, and I always say I have two of them. And but Rachel was always the kid in the corner, either drawing or writing. And we'd find scraps of paper along with drawings, writing, and little Playmobil and things in the corner. But she was the one underneath the family, I think, as she described it, always kind of recording what we were doing without us quite knowing it. She was a gift to our family the way she did that. But writing was always a part of Rachel's life, and we always treasured that. When she was killed, she had written to our family, mostly to Cindy, but then we spread it out to the family, all these powerful email that came back from Gaza, and a cousin of mine, just an hour or so after we heard the news that Rachel was killed, called, and Cindy said to him, we have to get her email out, we have to get her writing out. And it was just really, I think, a matter of hours, but maybe a day after that we heard that the Guardian newspaper was going to do an article on Rachel and would like some of her writing from which to take maybe a few quotes or something like that. And we sent off this stack of email electronically, and about a day after that we got back an email from their editor saying this is some of the most personal and powerful writing we've seen about Gaza in years. We decided just to simply publish Rachel's email rather than an article about her, but let her speak for herself. And that really started a chain of events that ended up in this book. A friend of the British actor Alan Rickman, a friend of his, was reading The Guardian that day and handed it to Alan and said, "Read this." And Alan picked it up, and he was working with the Royal Court Theatre, and he took it down there and he says, we need to work with this. We need to see if there's something we can do theatrically to work with this writing. And so the Royal Court Theatre got a hold of our family, and of course we had no idea what was going on, but they made contact with us. We talked to them about 6 months later, actually, on our way back from Israel and Palestine, the first time we were over there. And I talked with Alan Rickman, who was part of the group, and others there that I don't really remember now. And I didn't, actually, it's kind of funny, because we got done with that talking, and in that I said, you know, Rachel was a writer all of her life. It's not just the emails from Gaza, but would you be interested in any of her other writing? And Alan said, yeah, he would be. But we got done with that meeting, and we got outside, and I said to Cindy, we're supposed to know the actor with a deep voice. And then a couple hours later, I said, Sense and Sensibility, you know, he's insane. And of course, he's got this long list of both theater and movie credits. But it was Alan and then an editor of The Guardian, a different editor, Catherine Viner, that first edited Rachel's work and made the play My Name is Rachel Corrie, which is now playing in several places around the United States and in Canada, and I'm not sure where else all over the world, but a few weeks ago it opened in Arabic in Haifa by a Palestinian Israeli, and she did it very powerfully, and Cindy and I were just there, just came back about a week ago from seeing that play, and it was amazing. In fact, some people from the Royal Court came to watch that, including Catherine Viner, like I say, one of the original editors, Elise Dodson, who worked on it as their international international producer, and then the first person to play Rachel, Megan Dodds, was there. And so Megan came to see this other, this Palestinian Rachel. And then a young woman from Iceland came, and she's working on a translation into Icelandic, and she wanted to see Israel. So it's kind of amazing. I tell people, I really think it will play this year on every continent of the world except Antarctica. We don't have any plans to put it in Antarctica, but we can work on it, you know. So with that, the writing came out, and some of you may know it sort of faltered as coming to New York, but did come in the fall then of 2006. But in the spring, when the New York Theater Workshop kind of backed out of it, then a group sprang up called Rachel's Words, and they were having people read her email, which were available while the play was not, instead of the play, and that started another circle of Rachel's Words going. So in the middle of all that, I think it was Catherine Viner and Alan Rickman who first said, you know, you need to take this work that we're reading and put it into a book rather than having the edited parts out into a play. People need to be able to see what Rachel first wrote. So we tackled that, and luckily Sarah really put it all together. Most of this book is really due to Sarah getting it done, but I'm happy to take credit for it anyhow. And so, you know, words were always precious to Rachel, and I remember, like I say, even at an early age, I remember taking her to school when she was in 5th grade, to my office when she was in 5th grade, about 10 years old. And adults always ask the kids the same obnoxious question, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so a friend of mine says to Rachel, what do you want to be when you grow up? And Rachel stared him right back in the eye and said, I am a poet. So words were precious to Rachel, and her words have been a treasure to our family, and a gift to us. And with this book, we make that gift to you. So thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming out. It's wonderful to see this room fill up with people who care about Rachel's story, and I know are interested in what she has to say. Thank you so much for being here. It means a great deal to Craig and me and to all of our family. This is Rachel's birthday, and birthdays in our family usually started with a piece of French toast in the morning with a candle stuck in the middle, and whomever happened to be down around the breakfast table, if we happened to not all be together because of different schedules, but would sing happy birthday. Rachel wrote about the day she was born, and I'd just like to share that passage with you. And of course, this was gathered from her, all she had been told about her birthday. The day I was born, I have this image of that day that is made up of all the jagged fragments that my parents and my brother and sister and Claudia have told me. My mom is lying in her bedroom under her old, dirty white comforter with this splotchy, sleepy-eyed baby in her arms. Only my mom's face is smoother, and her hair is completely brown and long, and it swirls around her on the flowered pillowcases. My sister is there, and she is small and chubby, with huge dark eyes that I have seen in thousands of old photographs. She sits on the floor under the window and stares at me, but refuses to touch the spotted little creature. And my brother is on the bed with his skinny legs bent and propped up on his elbows so that he can study me and stick out an index finger to stroke my damp head or touch my tiny curling hands. My dad opens the door, and he is thinner, and his hair is longer, and his glasses and clothes make him look like a dazed and confused stand-in. He leads Claudia through the door. Claudia has a tiny baby in her arms, too, gurgling and plump with brown fluff hair and muddy green eyes. Bridget was Rachel's lifelong friend, someone that she grew up with, and she always said, I met my best friend on the day I was born. People have asked us about the title of the book, Let Me Stand Alone, because people know that community and connections were very, very important to Rachel. But I think in one particular passage, which is the beginning passage in the book, she explains her view of sometimes being able to stand alone to take a look at the world. If the words I use buzz away from my lips meaninglessly, then we'll let them hang in the air for a while. We'll let those silly words sit and make fools of themselves until other words come and crowd around them. I need to flutter and hover and look at the diamond ripples through 6 swirled insect eyes. Just don't touch me for a moment. Let me sit and stare at everything through my own eyes for a while. Let me dance in the lily petals and skim the trembling water and buzz like useless words in the air. Do you understand? Let me lie alone on my back in tall grass and see the sun and the water droplets on the branches and the red tree trunks through my own eyes. Let me color them and build them with my own words, lonely, strong words. Let me stand alone at the edge of the earth and look at it honestly, alone. Community was terribly important to Rachel, though. And she found community in a lot of unusual places. I was always, as her mother, interested in how she made connections with all kinds of people, much more easily than I did. And felt that she had a lot to learn from all of those people. She had a job with Hospital Diversion House, which was part of Behavioral Health Resources, a mental health agency in our community. And she worked the graveyard shift, and this is just a little example of some of the places where Rachel connected. On the bus after graveyard shift, I walked down to the stop on State to meet it. I have my snacks from last night in a paper bag. I can feel how pale I am on the bus. I make eye contact with a cute boy in the back who looks back balefully. I become enraptured. Everyone on the bus is chatty today. 2 women with sculpted hair and lipstick talk across the aisle to each other about their plans for getting health. And I'm going to walk more to work on the weight problem. And diet is really important. I begin to grin as we pass the autoglass shop. I can see what the guy across from me is reading and try to guess if he is an old man or an old woman. Behind the ladies, a black man with longish hair tells the woman next to him, "People here don't know what poor is. They're making $70,000 a year and they think they're poor. Because money makes you spend more money. You get stuff and then you have to take care of your stuff," the woman agrees. She's young, maybe my age. In the back of the bus, someone is talking about some band and they're trading headphones around. All these people are awake and chatty, and I'm tired from graveyard shift. I really do love them. I love us riding the bus together. Community was really important to Rachel, and that community expanded and I think has really grown tremendously now to be a community that goes across the globe, really in sort of reaching out to Rachel and to the message and to her spirit. And some of the people that are part of that community are with us tonight, and it seemed appropriate to Norton Publishing and to our family that they help us share Rachel's writing. And so we have with us some very special people, and I'm going to make sure I've got my list here because I made the mistake the other night of drawing a blank. So Diane Adkin, Jennifer Grosvenor, Jeffrey St. Clair, Celia Hassan, Matthew Barber, my daughter Sarah, will all be sharing with you now. And thanks so much to all of you for doing this.
Spring 1995. I remember looking out the window on the flight from Anchorage to Magadan, completely at odds with the fact that I was flying to Russia. I remember looking down at more ice than I had ever seen, and I remember bright blue cracks of water running jaggedly across all that whiteness. I kept memorizing those blue lines, telling myself what they looked like so that later I could write everything down. I couldn't believe where I was. I couldn't believe the blue cracks in the ice or the mix of languages bubbling up around me or the strange, vast country waiting for me at the end of all those blue lines. Russia. Russia. It wakes me up in the night and takes the air out of my lungs and squeezes tears out onto my cheeks for no apparent reason. How do I write it down? How do I write about Russia? I remember the exact moment when my sense of wonder came back. I don't know where it went or when it left or if I ever really had a sense of wonder in the first place, but I know when it came back. And 1996 to 1997, I write because in some secret compartment in my brain, this little ironclad woman keeps screaming, "It's all you have!" I write because it's art and it's my first love, before Russia. My first, my truest passion. It swallows me, ego and all, in one enormous gulp. I don't write letters. I write disjointed chapters in my unending epic. The muse, she climbs into your body and moves your puppet limbs and eases the words loose from the walls of your soul. I feel like I have been performing my whole life in this huge auditorium, but once in a while the house lights go on and I realize that I have no audience. Nothing but hollow rows of folding chairs. And I don't care. I write it down because instinct tells me to do. Sometimes I send a letter and my whole soul hopes they'll like it because it's personal. Because I created something for someone else and dared to write a name at the top. Writing is brave. It may be the only brave thing about me. Everyone gets scared. Sylvia Plath wrote, but I think what I fear most is the death of imagination. The other night I just felt like I was drowning. I kept throwing my hands onto books full of quotes and words, and my imagination could do nothing with any of it. I thought I'd finally lost myself. Silly, melodramatic girl. I was wrong. But it is still a shivering thing to rest your ear on the mattress and turn out the light and stare through blurred, salty eyes at a streetlight. I only get that scared when I run out of words. Lately, my whole soul is in chaos, passionate chaos. There aren't paintbrushes big enough for the things in me. There are no words that ring and pierce and reverberate. There's a pealing white noise in me right now, a very loud noise in my soul. I wish I had some purple paint and I'd roll naked in it and dance around and then you would understand that noise. I wish I had an empty auditorium and an enormous gong and I'd beat the very crystals off the chandeliers. I wish I had words, sweet, musical words, for the feelings in me. There are pages and pages of lined paper for me, and the tiny warrior woman is waking up again and screaming, "Girl, write! It's all you have!" Cut off an ear if you have to. Live in poverty and beg for food if with your dirty face and your torn pants you have a passion. I think this is what alcoholics call a moment of clarity. All of a sudden, I see the billowing sailboat trees against the midnight blue sky, and I smell rain. My eyes are very blue and very sharp in the reflection of my lamp in the window. That deep-eyed wraith in the window looks powerful and free. And I am exactly alone, but not lonely, in the folds of blanket. And I have been writing about an hour, writing feverishly. This is a moment when I am exactly and only me. And I am Diane Adkin. I have been interested in the causes of peace and justice all over the world. For 35 years, I've been involved in the Palestinian issue, mainly media and lobbying. I visited Palestine in 2006 on a reality tour with Global Exchange. I wish I'd known Rachel. We are in a small community, and our paths were very likely to cross at one point. I have met her parents. I love, respect, and admire them. I'm here tonight because Cindy Corrie asked me, and when Cindy asks me something, I am programmed to say yes.
I'm Jennifer Grosvenor, and actually Diane and I have both been involved in doing media studies on our local newspaper because of the omissions that we found both in the news and the editorial sections. And we wrote a book with 3 others who did that, titled Dangerous Omissions: How the U.S. Media Perpetuates the Palestinian-Israeli Conflict, a case study. I am from Olympia, grew up there, and in 2002, my husband and I were scheduled to go on a Lutheran World Relief fact-finding trip to the occupied territories in Israel. And shortly before that trip, the Palestinian cities went under siege. We've been doing intense study, and it was an eye-opener as we began to hear a whole perspective, another set of stories that were being withheld actually from our American eyes. So in 2003, we traveled with Sabine, and we arrived in Gaza 10 days after Rachel had been killed. At the time, I knew she was from Olympia, so it was my hometown, and I had received a few of her writings via email from my late night. My mother's about 78 years old, and she's sending me emails. When we were in Ramallah at a school for handicapped children, we saw a poster with Rachel. I knew she was a student from Evergreen, but when I found out she was born and raised in Olympia, that's me, and then when I found out her birth date, she's a month older than my firstborn. And then when I met Cindy and saw had some similarities. And now when I read Rachel and her early writings, I am just astounded. She's so much more. She's so much more. I mean, I already thought all her writings from Gaza were so amazing, but it's more, so much more. I'm going to read Dear Mom, and this was written by Rachel. Winter 1998. I hope I get through it without tearing up. Dear Mom, I'm sitting in LA at dawn, looking out at a stagnant swimming pool and a rainbow of flowers. I had a dream about you last night. You haunt me because I see a light coming out of you. But your light is a different color than my light. And I want to whisper, don't be scared. And I want to pretend that I can become your idea of me. But I can't. I know I scare you. But being on a tightrope with a safety net and a costume doesn't work for me. I want to paint my face with the color of your eyes, but I don't want to wear your costume. When I look at you, I see music. I can see a song playing on your face, in your voice, when you talk to me, when you talk to my friends. And I'm grateful. I fall down and I sob over that song. I cry with gratitude, because you can make that song for so many people. I have to do things that scare you. I'm sorry I scare you. I hope I'm not ugly in your eyes, but I want to write. And I want to see. And what would I write about if I only stayed within the doll's house, the flower world I grew up in? What kind of writer would I be? What kind of seer would I be if I stayed in the prism I grew up in? I would hear the bird voices like kazoos and xylophones. I would see the rainbows and sparkles in everyone's eyes. But I wouldn't be able to accept ugliness that was different than my ugliness. I wouldn't be able to see pain that was beyond my pain, our pain. I would be beautiful. I would be strong like you. I would have a smile like yours, and that strength and that smile are mountains and cornfields and daisies and milkweed. And I shudder and I sob at the beauty of all that. That was my phone, I apologize. You brought me the soil with you from Iowa. Excuse me, you brought the soil with you from Iowa. You brought the bare, fecund soil, and you passed it on to me. You gave me a love that was so unconditional, that is so bare and poignant and forgiving and brown and soft like the soil, that I have to plant things in it. I have to plant cacti and palm trees and sticker bushes and daisies and pumpkins. I have to let the wild ginger and ferns take root and grow there. You gave me a potential. I grew up with faith. And letting in everything that I can let in without breaking myself is the only justice I can do to all that soil. You gave me a flower bed and a cornfield and a lake and a whitish gray house and cedar trees, and I won't let those things break apart. You gave me a planting ground, and because it's so dank and warm and solid, I have to challenge it with the hardiest and the most fragile plants I can find. I love you, but I'm growing out of what you gave me. I'm saving it inside me and growing outward. Thank you. Thank you. Let me fight my monsters. I love you. You made me. You made me.
Wow, how do you follow that? I feel like Hillary getting up after Obama. My name's Jeffrey St. Clair, and I'm co-editor of Counterpunch, which is a newsletter and website. I live in, we call it Big Stumptown, which is Oregon City. And I met Rachel, I think it was in 1999, but I didn't know it at the time, of course. I only realized it through photos years later. It was in the tiny town of Randall, Washington, where environmentalists, many of them from Evergreen College, were using direct action to try to save this community, this small town, from being buried under mudslides, sure to follow from the rampant clear-cutting planned by Weyerhaeuser on the steep, unstable slopes above their town. And I was looking at the photos of those protests earlier this week, and there was Rachel's face, and it was a face of joyful defiance. Now, I have a good friend named Steve Niva, who was one of Rachel's professors at Evergreen College, and Steve sent Alexander Coburn, who's my co-editor, and I, several of Rachel's dispatches from the occupied territories. So I was familiar early on with the high quality of her writing. The real surprise for me, though, from reading Rachel's journals is not the quality of her prose, but the sharpness of her mind, the richness of her spirit. Let Me Stand Alone is not a martyr's book by any means, but the testimony of a vivacious and brilliant, as in filled with light, spirit. Rachel was in love with life itself, and she engaged the world head on, with open eyes and an open heart. In my mind, Rachel Corrie stands forth as the most courageous American of the new century. Her voice in these journals and letters and poems resonates with an immortal call for justice and a deep declaration of love for this fragile blue planet itself, a voice that can't be silenced by the blade of any bulldozer. Perhaps one day soon, I hope it's soon, Craig and Cindy will find a measure of justice for the unspeakable crime done to their daughter and our friend, Rachel Corrie. But I'm not talking about justice in a narrow sense, in that obvious sense of admissions of guilt and culpability from Bush, from Caterpillar, from the Israeli Defense Forces, but justice in the broadest sense, in the sense that Rachel pushed for, in forging change in policy that puts human rights and human dignity first. And that is our obligation. It is, in fact, our inheritance from Rachel. And it's an inheritance that we dare not squander. Now, I chose a passage from the book that I think anchors Rachel as a Northwesterner, a passage about her experience with our totemic species, the Chinook salmon, whose own struggle for survival takes it across another kind of occupied territory. I think in the end, I'll say it was the salmon that saved me. Nobody ever thinks to ask, so what saved you, when they scoot in next to you on the bus? So I'll say it to myself as I wait at the bus stop, in the bathroom, spitting toothpaste flakes across the mirror. I was saved by the wild salmon. I was saved by the wild salmon. My roommates will become disenchanted, and I will be forced to live alone. Trevor, today is the beginning of a brand new life. I hop around in my socks in the kitchen. There's something nasty on the floor near the refrigerator, and my foot gets snared for a minute before I yank it back and head for the coffee pot. Today is the beginning of a brand new life, Trevor. I'm going to clean my room. Trevor leans on the stove in his pinstriped pajamas. His hair is funny and his voice is thin from sleeping. That's good. Maybe we can work on the living room too. I ignore him and scamper back to my bedroom. The pellet stove is broken. It's November. I have to wear layers. Today is the beginning of a brand new life. Today is the beginning of a brand new life. I chant it to myself as I pull on long underwear. It cracks me up. It's a joke with myself. I'm trying to stave off boa constrictor boredom. What a beautiful metaphor that is. This is the 28th day I will go to work this month, for at least a few hours, which is good. This is the 6th month in a row I've worked almost every day, which is good. At work, I am never bored. In a month, I will have enough money to pay my tuition for the rest of my time in school. I will work less for 2 years, finish school, go to the Peace Corps. Sometime soon, I will write every day again, if I can just put my mind to it. I will have a clean room. I will plan my escape from Olympia to a foreign place. I will finish the novel. I will get bigger biceps from lifting weights at Matt's house. I will do my laundry. Sometime soon, I will be able to call myself an artist. But this is not a brand new life. This is just part of the plan. I return to the kitchen and breeze past Trevor to the coffee pot. Do we have any travel mugs? I got to do some errands. The DNR, Department of Natural Resources, the DNR guy and the salmon, the DNR guy said the salmon follow the stars. How do they make it back to the very same river to spawn every time? Smell? Ocean currents? Studies have shown they follow the stars. What studies? This sounds like a miracle to me. Show me these studies. I think you're onto something metaphysical. He couldn't cite the studies off the top of his head at that lecture, but I believe they are around. I believe wild salmon follow the stars. I felt guilty that day. The DNR guy explained what they needed to spawn. Loose gravel, dead logs that crash into the streams and nestle in there so that there are slow, deep places. They need pools and undisturbed gravel beds and shade so that the water stays cool. I kicked the toe of one of my red wings into the floor, gently, again and again. It was a big room of us in our work shirts and our Carhartts watching the DNR guy. Arlen elbowed the guy next to him, and they snickered about something he drew on his folder. It was a big room of kids who had gotten used to planting a couple hundred seedlings a day, or pulling Scotch broom, or doing in-stream work to make those pools, make fake logs, because the real logs weren't always left behind. I think most of us cared. Arlen didn't care. He played hangman with the guy next to him. At least several of us cared. We raised our hands with their sunburnt backs to ask questions. What about the salmon from Norway? Can we eat the salmon from Norway? At least several of us cared. But we were used to being outside for 10 hours a day with our shovels and our Pulaskis. We weren't used to lectures. We were used to safety reports. Tell me how to cut this notch without the blade snapping back in my face. Tell me how far apart the drill holes to drill the holes for the rebar. We were smart, but we had biceps. Even I had biceps. We'd been excavating campgrounds from the snow all week at the mountain. Our biceps were getting antsy and wrestling with themselves inside our skin. It was hard to take care where the studies came from. We were hungry for the evening when we could take out the rowboats. From the time that the mama salmon swishes her tail around in the gravel and makes a divot, from the time she releases the red from inside her silverness and her pink insideness, a lot of the babies die. You have a lot to contend with if you're born a fish baby. Herons, runoff, shadeless streams getting warm as bathwater, the Grand Coulee Dam. I traced small triangles on the floorboards with the toes of my red wings. I felt guilty. The DNR guy said salmon have disappeared from 40% of their streams. Disappeared. Poof. Fleets of salmon Houdinis spontaneously effervescing. Something metaphysical. Could you get one and do a demonstration? Poof. The DNR guy showed us a graph of populations over the last 50 years. Human versus salmon. It looked like an X. First, the salmon were ahead by a mile, but then we started closing in on them. In the middle of the X, we were even, so there was a war. The war was the salmon's fault because they had a monopoly on the water, and they were hoarding it. They were also pink, and everybody knows what that means. The humans won because we were better educated, and because the salmon had a big-time societal problem with being addicted to spontaneously effervescing.
I'm Sarah Corrie Simpson, and I'm Rachel's sister, and as Jeffrey referred to, Rachel spent a lot of time up at Mount Rainier. She actually worked for the Washington Conservation Corps for a little under a year, I think it was. And we're going to try to do a little, our family theater for the night and read a little bit of Rachel's humor from that time up at Mount Rainier.
Mount Rainier, please explode suddenly like a Chinese friendship pagoda and kill us all. No warning. Please, Mount Rainier, evade the seismic charts dotting your movement as if you were as simple as the electricity in a human heartbeat. Be stealthy. Please, kill us at dinner time so that later they unearth us in an archaeological dig with our forks poised and our dopey cattle facial expressions still intact. I want the archaeologist to slice layers of embalming volcano dust away from us and find our elbows still glued to a very expensive picnic table and mummified pierogi hanging out of our mouths. And I want them to chisel pumice from the intricate furrows between our eyebrows. Catch us at dinner time, please, Mount Rainier, so that the archaeologist, upon sweeping dust from our faces with toothbrushes, inspect our furrowed brows and our urgent, horse-flared nostrils and laugh and laugh and laugh.
Why, this one has an enormous piece of onion in its teeth.
Why, this one spilled sour cream all down its shirt.
And upon examination of their faces, it seems that they are either a crew of displaced circus clowns or a horde of blabbering intellectuals.
Maybe they will take another look at our listless fish mouths, all open and limp, as if we had all been shot with Novocaine before our demise, and hastily rebury us.
Lord knows we don't need any more pretentious intellectual fossils, Doctor.
Good Lord bless us, Jim, we don't.
Already have an extensive, monotonous collection of horse nostrils and slack jaws.
What with liberal Democrat man they found last year in the ice.
And that tourist bus, the lava caught in Mexico.
And that aging hippie man cluster they found frozen in leaking refrigerator coolant.
And that presidential motorcade tribe they say got caught when the Rockies finally had enough and swallowed up I-90 in one gulp.
They will carefully measure the parabolas of our expressions and the angles at which our spoons were frozen as we pointed them at each other emphatically.
The depth of these dimples definitely point to some self-congratulatory laughter, Doctor.
And the upward slant of these ocular cavities, combined with the extreme clench of the thumb and forefinger on the spoon, suggest a rhetorical question.
Ah, this is positively the Rosetta Stone of a raised eyebrow of superiority.
I'm afraid we must conclude these are no circus clowns, Jim.
Terribly sorry, Doctor.
They will cluck with their tongues and shake their heads as they shovel the volcanic residue over us.
The number of people who appear to have had words like paradigm and conservative and postmodernism on their lips when the natural disasters swallowed them, it's astounding, isn't it, Jim?
In my opinion, Doctor, that element of our ancestry is best left buried. Bad for the species morale, knowing our primitive forefathers ran around in their own heads like gerbils in cheese mazes.
Couldn't even pause their yabbering long enough to hear all the trees snapping down around them.
Maybe they'll use McLeods to tamp down the rubble above our heads. Maybe they'll unzip back to pack and pause to piss before their march back to camp.
Someday we'll find circus clowns. Someday.
I hope so, Jim.
Wow. Okay. Hi, I'm Celia, and I'm a political science major at Reed College. I never had the opportunity to meet Rachel, but I'm really honored to be a part of this program tonight. I connect with Rachel's story because I lived and traveled in Palestine my sophomore year of high school, and I had many of the same experiences and reactions. Living in Palestine was an eye-opening experience for me because up until that point, I really had a hard time understanding just how privileged I had been in my life and how different the experiences of children in Palestine were to those of American children. I was also really struck by the reality of the situation and the fact that as an American, I could leave at any time, while for the Palestinians living there permanently, this was a luxury that they didn't have. Okay. February 7th, 2003. I have been in Palestine for 2 weeks and 1 hour now, and I still have very few words to describe what I see. It is most difficult for me to think about what's going on here when I sit down to write back to the United States. Something about the virtual portal into luxury. I don't know if many of the children here have ever existed without tank shell holes in their walls and the towers of an occupying army surveying them constantly from near horizons. I think, although I'm not entirely sure, that even the smallest of these children understand that life is not like this everywhere. An 8-year-old was shot and killed by an Israeli tank 2 days before I got here, and many of the children murmur his name to me, Ali, or point at the posters of him on the walls. The children also love to get me to practice my limited Arabic by asking me, Kif Sharon, Kif Bush, and they laugh when I say, Bush Majnoon, Sharon Majnoon, back in my limited Arabic. How is Sharon? How is Bush? Bush is crazy, Sharon is crazy. Of course, this isn't quite what I believe, and some of the adults who have the English correct me. Bush Mish Majnoon, Bush is a businessman. Today I tried to learn to say Bush is a tool, but I don't think it quite translated right. But anyway, there are 8-year-olds here much more aware of the workings of the global power structure than I was just a few years ago, at least regarding Israel. Nevertheless, I think about the fact that no amount of reading, attendance at conferences, documentary viewing, and word of mouth could have prepared me for the reality of the situation here. You just can't imagine it unless you see it. And even then, you are always well aware that your experience of it is not at all the reality. What with the difficulties the Israeli army would face if they shot an unarmed U.S. citizen, and with the fact that I have money to buy water when the army destroys wells, and the fact, of course, that I have the option of leaving. Nobody in my family has been shot, driving in their car, by a rocket launcher from a tower at the end of a major street in my hometown. I have a home. I'm allowed to go see the ocean. Ostensibly, it is still quite difficult for me to be held for months or years on end without a trial. This because I am a white U.S. citizen, as opposed to so many others. When I leave for school or work, I can be relatively certain that there will not be a heavily armed soldier waiting halfway between Mud Bay and downtown Olympia at a checkpoint with the power to decide whether I can go about my business and whether I can get home again when I'm done. So, if I feel outrage at arriving and entering briefly and incompletely into the world in which these children exist, I wonder conversely about how it would be for them to arrive in my world. They know that children in the United States don't usually have their parents shot and sometimes get to see the ocean. But once you have seen the ocean and lived in a silent place, where water is taken for granted and not stolen in the night by bulldozers, and spent an evening when you didn't wonder if the walls of your home might suddenly fall inward, waking you from your sleep, and met people who have never lost anyone. Once you have experienced the reality of a world that isn't surrounded by murderous towers, tanks, armed settlements, and now a giant metal wall, I wonder if you can forgive the world for all the years of your childhood spent existing, just existing, in resistance to the constant stranglehold of the world's fourth largest military apparatus, backed by the world's only superpower, and its attempt to erase you from your home. That is something I wonder about these children. I wonder what would happen if they really knew.
Good evening. My name is Matthew Barber. I am a native Oregonian and currently a student at PSU studying Arabic in the Middle East. I've been privileged to travel to Palestine 2 times. And in 2006, I studied at Birzeit University, studied Arabic and the Palestinian situation. And I relate to a great extent to Rachel's experience in Palestine as her consciousness shifted and she became aware of what we're not told here. When I went to the West Bank, I did not know what a refugee camp looked like. I'd never seen one. I didn't know how to distinguish it from the rest of the surroundings. I didn't recognize the face of oppression because I did not know it. But over time, I learned. I learned about oppression by living in Palestine. And Rachel learned. And when I watch the footage of Rachel being interviewed in Gaza, and she's discussing her experiences, she talks about the change of awareness, the expanding sphere of awareness. And that's very significant to me. Folks, what happened to Rachel is an example of the worst end of the extreme, but it is representative of what happens there daily. When I was studying in Birzeit University, one day 6 Israeli jeeps drove into the entrance of the university, came out of their jeeps and began shooting machine guns at the university. I crouched on the ground in the rocks and the grass with other students as we tried to figure out which direction the bullets were coming. And fortunately, my life was spared that day. But Rachel's life was not given in vain. She gave it courageously, and it's still bearing significant fruit today. She's an inspiration and an example to all of us, and I think from the readings tonight, we get a sense of what kind of young woman she was. And I realized after coming back from the West Bank that I had become very familiar with the struggle of a minority in the Middle East, but I neglected my knowledge and education about a minority here in the States that has faced a very similar story, and that is the community of Native Americans. And this term at Portland State University, I began taking a class about the political accomplishments of great tribal leaders in recent decades. And today, in the class, we viewed a documentary, an interview with one of the first female chiefs of a particular tribe, and she related a story about a terrible car accident she was involved with and a near-death experience that happened to her. And she said that she felt herself drawn toward a source of unconditional love, and she was moving toward it before she was called back to her body by an image of her children that she needed to care for. And then she said, after that, I no longer fear death. And so I no longer fear life. That empowerment allowed that woman to step forward into life and do great, significant work that touched the lives of a lot of people. And I feel like that corresponds very significantly to the life of this young woman who had no idea that her story would be touching all of us here in this room tonight. And the significance of that is that that's your life and that's my life. This isn't the story of great, exceptional individuals. It's our story. We all have that within us. We are effective. We have a lot of work to do in our community and in the world. Don't ever lose your hope. And when you have lost it, get it back and move forward. So it's a great honor for me to participate tonight in honoring Rachel by reading to you the last email that she wrote from this earth, written from the Gaza Strip, March 12th, several days before she was killed. And this is a letter that she wrote to her father. Hi, Papa. Thank you for your email. I feel like sometimes I spend all my time propagandizing Mom and assuming she'll pass stuff on to you so you don't get neglected. So you get neglected. Sorry. Don't worry about me too much. Right now I am most concerned that we are not being effective. I still don't feel particularly at risk. Rafa has seemed calmer lately. Maybe because the military is preoccupied with incursions in the north. Still shooting and house demolitions. One death this week that I know of, but not any larger incursions. I can't say how this will change if and when war with Iraq comes. Thanks also for stepping up your anti-war work. I know it is not easy to do, and probably much more difficult where you are than where I am. I am really interested in talking to the journalist in Charlotte. Let me know what I can do to speed the process along. I am trying to figure out what I'm going to do when I leave here and when I'm going to leave. Right now, I think I could stay until June financially. I really don't want to move back to Olympia, but do need to go back there to clean my stuff out of the garage and talk about my experiences here. On the other hand, now that I've crossed the ocean, I'm feeling a strong desire to stay across the ocean for some time. Considering trying to get English teaching jobs. Would really like to buckle down and learn Arabic. Also got an invitation to visit Sweden on my way back, which I think I could do very cheaply. I would like to leave Rafa with a viable plan to return. One of the core members of our group has to leave tomorrow, and watching her say goodbye to people is making me realize how difficult it will be. People here can't leave, so that complicates things. They are also pretty matter of fact that they don't know if they will be alive when we come back here. I really don't want to live with a lot of guilt about this place, being able to come and go so easily, and not going back. I think it is valuable to make commitments to places, so I would like to be able to plan on coming back here within a year or so. Of all these possibilities, I think it's most likely that I will at least go to Sweden for a few weeks on my way back. I can change tickets and get a plane from Paris to Sweden and back for a total of $150 or so. I know I should try to link up with the family in France, but I think that I'm not going to do that. I would just be angry the whole time and not much fun to be around. It seems like a transition into too much opulence right now. I would feel a lot of class guilt the whole time. Let me know if you have any ideas about what I should do with the rest of my life. I love you very much. If you want, you can write to me as if I were on a vacation at a camp on the big island of Hawaii learning to weave. One thing I do to make things easier here is to utterly retreat into fantasies that I am in a Hollywood movie or a sitcom starring Michael J. Fox. So feel free to make something up, and I'll be happy to play along. Much love, Poppy. Rachel.
You've been tuned to a presentation by the Corrie family and friends, celebrating Rachel Corrie's birthday and reading from the just-published book, Let Me Stand Alone, The Journals of Rachel Corrie. Featured in this program were Craig and Cindy Corrie, their daughter Sarah Corrie, Diane Atkin, Jennifer Grosvenor, Jeffrey St. Clair, Celia Hassan, and Matthew Barber. In a moment, we'll return to the question segment of the program. To find out more about Rachel Corrie and about the foundation created by her parents to continue their daughter's work, please visit the Rachel Corrie Foundation for Peace and Justice website at www.rachelcorriefoundation.org. You'll find news and updates and the opportunity to support important programs and projects. And now we return to the question segment of the program.
Thank you all for that wonderful readings that you've done. That was great. I think we've got some time for some questions, and maybe we'll have some answers. So you guys got to supply the questions, however. Yeah.
Yes.
I just have to make a comment. Rachel was killed on my birthday, and I'm here on her birthday, and I'm really just overwhelmed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a possibility of her play being shown here in May 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th at the Shoebox Theater.
Oh.
She's still working it out, but
Fantastic. Yeah. Great. Oh, excuse me. There's a chance that the play will be shown here on May 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th.
I can say something to that. I'm directing it.
Ah!
And the reason we've been kind of quiet about it is that the rights haven't come through yet. And so we've hesitated to promote it at all. But as it's, I'm hoping that this will happen in the next couple of days. But it is scheduled for the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th of May at the Shoebox Theater, which is a small theater. And as soon as we get the okay, then I will just put it out to the newspapers.
Yeah,
So
well,
if you
talk
could
to me then.
Maybe repeat the.
Okay, yeah, there are people clearing the back. So the director of the play is here, and they're still waiting for approval from the agent, who actually doesn't work for us anymore. So we're a little removed from that, but we still have some moral persuasion involved in that. So yeah, give us a call if that approval doesn't come through. So it's going to be in a small theater, the Shoebox Theater.
The Shoebox Theater. We wanted to do a longer run, but our schedule was already set for this season. So we're hoping to fit it in for a real run in next year's season.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
Has there been any apology or anything from Caterpillar of that sort?
No, there's not been any apology, I don't really think, from anybody. Excuse me, the question is, has there been any apology from Caterpillar, who has built the bulldozer that crushed Rachel, or anything of that sort? And there's a whole story sort of behind that. Our family has a lawsuit against Caterpillar, and the thought behind that is not that Caterpillar sold a vehicle to somebody and that then they went out and used it to crush Rachel. Is that Caterpillar sold that machinery knowing that the machinery had been previously used for human rights violations. So and they went ahead and sold that anyhow. And there is existing law that can hold a U.S. corporation responsible for violations, human rights violations, that they're complicit in that. However, as it stands right now, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled that we cannot take that lawsuit forward, even though there's been no discovery in it. So there are no facts actually proven, but they took the the Justice Department's statement and Caterpillar's statement that the U.S. has funded all of the bulldozers that were sold, and so if their reasoning is that if the U.S. government funded that, then it would be an embarrassment to the U.S. government if we sued Caterpillar, and so that under the separation of powers doctrine, the courts cannot do something to the executive branch that would embarrass them. There are a lot of it's a political question and a separation of powers question. And there are a lot of things that our attorneys, who are very good and well-known attorneys, think that may be wrong about that. So we've asked them to reconsider that. But that's the way that stands right now. And again, I just emphasize that it's not really, for instance, if you sold me a shotgun, you'd have every reason to expect that I'd go out and hunt pheasants with that. And if I went over and shot up McDonald's, that wouldn't be your fault. But if you came into McDonald's while I was shooting up McDonald's and said, here, I think you'd like this better, then you have a certain responsibility for that. And that's a high, it's a high level for us to get across. It's a high hurdle for us to get across in a court of that sort of accusation. But we thought we could do that, and we proceeded forward.
I'd like to just say a couple of things about the lawsuit as well. We did have last year a day in court in Seattle before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and it was quite amazing. Our attorneys are with the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York. You'll often see their name involved with some very important cases that have to do with other civil rights cases in places like Guantanamo. Also the Seattle, the Ronald Peterson Law Clinic with Seattle University, we also have representation from them. A very well-known constitutional lawyer, Erwin Chemerinsky, argued the case, which was all pretty much on political question that day, but did it remarkably. It was really quite exhilarating to be in a courtroom and to hear some of this, to hear some discussion about this there. But as Craig pointed out, the Ninth Circuit decided to affirm the lower court's opinion to not let the case go forward. But we are waiting because we did ask for a rehearing at the advice of our attorneys and after some careful consideration. But one thing I wanted to make sure you all know is that there were 4 Palestinian families on that lawsuit as well. They were families, one in Jenin, where sometimes I mix up the people, but in Jenin, where I believe it was a disabled man who could not get out of his house. This was in 2002, and even though family members were yelling at the Caterpillar bulldozers for the demolition to stop, they did not, and the man was killed. When Craig and I were just there in Israel and Palestine, we've just come back, and we went to Nablus for the first time and had some other extraordinary experiences, which I could tell you about, including talking in the town circle in Nablus with a crowd of people who were remembering Rachel that day. It was very moving, but we also were meeting with Syed Abu Hijla, whose mother in 2002 it was curfew. She was sitting on her balcony with her husband, she was 61, I think, at the time. Husband is a throat surgeon, and an IDF Jeep pulled up, sat in the street, then started firing 14 shots, and she was shot in the head. Saeed or not in the head, but in the abdomen, I believe, and was killed. Their family has gone to school in Iowa, and she has a sister in Iowa, and we have a lot of family in Iowa too. And this is a case, she was killed before Rachel, and this is a case that's gotten quite a lot of attention in Iowa. People have tried to bring it forward for more attention in this country as well. So it was really very moving to meet with Syed. He's kind of a Pied Piper. He has wonderful English too, but he walked through Nablus, and it was marvelous to go with him because everybody knew him and talked with us. But one of the places that he took us was to the cemetery, and as we were walking down through it, I see this name, Al-Shobi, and then I recognize that that's one of the families on the lawsuit, and I haven't met these people before. But the Al-Shobi family in Nablus, we saw the place where this happened. Their house was demolished on top of them. 8 family members were killed. Caterpillar bulldozers were involved in that. And then there was a family also in Khan Yunis in Gaza, also an elderly man who was not able to get out, and the house was demolished on top of him with Caterpillar equipment. So I just want you to understand that this is all bigger than Rachel. And we feel, actually what we really felt like, I know there's a lot of misunderstanding about the Caterpillar lawsuit, but I think that it's terribly important in this day and age, and given the reach of our corporations, that when they're not operating responsibly, that we draw attention to that. So I just wanted you to understand.
There's a question way in the back there. Yeah. The question is, have we considered taking this lawsuit to international court? And I think that we'd follow it through U.S. channels first, and we really have not given that any consideration. We also have a lawsuit, and kind of goes back to the original question about, has anybody sort of apologized? We have a lawsuit against the Israeli government as well, and we're trying to take that forward. And that lawsuit is because there's been no investigation into Rachel's killing. Adequate, yeah. Then we're trying to find through the discovery process what we can find out. Now, Prime Minister Sharon, the day after Rachel was killed, promised President Bush a thorough, credible, and transparent investigation and a report to be given to our government. And as our government stands still, that the report that they were allowed to read but not actually be delivered to them did not, and they say unequivocally, we can say, was not indication of a thorough, credible, and transparent investigation. And they say that they repeatedly have asked for such an investigation, and their requests continue to go ignored by the Israeli government. So we have another lawsuit going there, and I don't know where that would go, but mostly all that is about discovery, we should have access then to the information that the Israeli military has about what they were doing, what happened to Rachel, and we're trying to bring that forward. In terms of the Israeli government, if they ever apologize or say they were sorry, we sort of incredibly had a call right after Rachel was killed from the Consul General for the Pacific Northwest, and his office is down in San Francisco, and he talked to my son, and he just said he was, I think, condolences. So that's, it's not guilt, but just saying he felt bad. And then Cindy and I met with him a few months later, and he said, I want you to know that statement came from me. It didn't come from my government, which is extraordinary for a diplomat. He should never say anything that his government didn't believe. So I found it both extraordinary that he would make a statement like that, and that he would call it to our attention that it wasn't his government sending condolences. So that's the closest that we've got. Another question? Yeah.
Craig, I know that Israel is trying to keep a lot of Americans from coming in, specifically if they're activists. Do you have any trouble getting in? Do they?
The question was, Israel sometimes keeps particularly activists out of the country. When you come into Ben Gurion, the airport, they often ask, and that's the way we've come in, a lot of questions about who are you going to see and that sort of thing. The first time we came in was we are escorted by the U.S. Embassy, so we had no problem then. The other two times that we've been there, one of the people we're always going to see is our attorney, and so if they're going to keep us from seeing our attorney, they'll hear about that in a lot of different other ways. So basically, they kind of stamp our passport, and we have a good day. I think they do know who we are. I don't know that for sure, but they've got that computer.
There was just one thing I'd like to add about investigation and the statements, the repeated statements that we now have from our government, from high-level State Department officials, that there has not been an adequate investigation. And the most recent one was a letter sent to us just a few weeks ago, in which Michelle Bernier Toth, who is was the, I think at that point, the acting director of citizen services in the State Department, said that they have repeatedly asked the Israeli government for a thorough, credible, and transparent investigation, and that their requests are either ignored or not adequately answered, and that she didn't expect that the Israelis would do anything further on Rachel's case. Now, the thing about that's a really very strong statement coming from the U.S. government. The thing about that is that there are to be consequences in the United States with our funding. If there's evidence of human rights violations occurring and the government or the IDF doesn't adequately, any government in any country, but in this case, if the IDF and the Israeli government doesn't adequately address that, we have something called the Leahy Amendment, and there's supposed to be withholding of training funds and other kinds of funding. Our family, one of the things that we do is to continue to try to work for accountability. It's very, very hard work, and many people have helped us with it. But this is a place where we'll need to go back and say, okay, what's the consequence if there's no investigation of this? What's the consequence to the unit? What is the unit that was involved, and what is the consequence to that unit since there's not been adequate investigation?
We've got time for one more question and maybe an answer. Yeah.
To maybe carry that further, many of us are now on a daily basis hearing about the question of business as usual versus human rights violations as applied to even a worldwide event like the Olympics. I wonder if from your particular vantage point, if you could shed some light on how we might as individuals consider this.
Do you want? In some ways, I'll answer that, because that to me was what the Caterpillar lawsuit was entirely about. For me, coming from a corporate background, I was an insurance actuary for my career, and so I kind of turned on the corporate world, I suppose, in some sense. But it seems to me that we have existing U.S. law that holds corporations responsible for their actions, like I said before. And it seems to me if just a couple more lawsuits that would enforce that, and there have been successful lawsuits. You won against Unical recently, and there's another one going through the court right now. But it would change the conversation in a boardroom. And so instead of somebody saying, I don't know what they're doing with our equipment, but we don't need to know, that's their problem. Somebody, as soon as that got brought up, somebody said, well, we got to find out, because if we don't, it's our duty to investigate that, and if our company is held liable, then the board of directors might be held personally liable if they don't do due diligence on that. In the financial industry that I was in, and while I was in insurance, banks, for instance, are required to know their customer well enough to know where the money comes to keep from money laundering. So you're supposed to figure out if $1,000 that comes into your bank came from somebody selling drugs on the street. It seems kind of difficult to me. But a few $1 million, $10 million that gets spent on, to purchase one piece of machinery, you ought to be able to figure out kind of reasonably what that's going to be used to, or what it's been used for in the past. I think that's reasonable, and I think it would be good to have some sort of reasonable control on our corporations.
Actually, in terms of Congress, I also want to say my primary role in the family has been doing a lot of the investigative work and going back to Congress. And in terms of the Leahy Amendment that my father mentioned, the one thing I would say as citizens, that if human rights are important to us, we have to be telling that to Congress. And the thing that I was shocked about is here we do have laws on the books in terms of consequences that are supposed to happen in terms of military funding if human rights laws are violated. Yet when I go to Congress, there is one staff person who's working very, very hard in Senator Leahy's office, who basically has to handle every human rights case that comes forward to him. And it seems to me if it was a priority of our government to be looking at human rights violations and how our money is spent comprehensively, there'd be more than one person that would be addressing those issues. So I would suggest talking to your congresspeople and your senators and asking them how they handle human rights violations and how Congress as a whole is looking at that, because I think it needs to be handled at a more comprehensive level with more than one staff person working very, very hard but needing support in addressing these issues.
You've been tuned to a presentation by the Corrie family and friends, celebrating Rachel Corrie's birthday and reading from the just published book, Let Me Stand Alone, The Journals of Rachel Corrie. Featured in this program were Craig and Cindy Corrie, their daughter Sarah Corrie, Diane Atkin, Jennifer Grosvenor, Jeffrey St. Clair, Celia Hassan, and Matthew Barber. Special thanks to the Rachel Corrie Foundation for Peace and Justice. Please visit their website at www.rachelcorriefoundation.org and consider making a generous contribution to support their work. Special thanks also to Powell's City of Books of Portland, Oregon. This program was produced by pdxjustice Media Productions. To find out more about this program and the many other programs in our video and audio library, please visit our website at www.pdxjustice.org. You'll find programs featuring speakers such as Phyllis Bennis, P. Synoth, Natalie Angier, Susan Faludi, Rashid Khalidi, and many others. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for supporting listener-sponsored radio, public access cable television, net neutrality, and all forms of grassroots, democratic, community media.
Fill up with people who care about Rachel's story, and I know are interested in what she has to say. Thank you so much for being here. It means a great deal to Craig and me and to all of our family. This is Rachel's birthday, and birthdays in our family usually started with a piece of French toast in the morning with a candle stuck in the middle, and whomever happened to be down around the breakfast table, if we happened to not all be together because of different schedules, but would sing happy birthday. Rachel wrote about the day she was born, and I'd just like to share that passage with you. And of course, this was gathered from her, all she had been told about her birthday. The day I was born, I have this image of that day that is made up of all the jagged fragments that my parents and my brother and sister and Claudia have told me. My mom is lying in her bedroom under her old, dirty white comforter with this splotchy, sleepy-eyed baby in her arms. Only my mom's face is smoother, and her hair is completely brown and long, and it swirls around her on the flowered pillowcases. My sister is there, and she is small and chubby, with huge dark eyes that I have seen in thousands of old photographs. She sits on the floor under the window and stares at me, but refuses to touch the spotted little creature. And my brother is on the bed with his skinny legs bent and propped up on his elbows so that he can study me and stick out an index finger to stroke my damp head or touch my tiny curling hands. My dad opens the door, and he is thinner, and his hair is longer, and his glasses and clothes make him look like a dazed and confused stand-in. He leads Claudia through the door. Claudia has a tiny baby in her arms.
Rachel was a treasure to us, as all our kids were. You know, a lot of people say I had an extraordinary daughter, and I always say I have two of them. And but Rachel was always the kid in the corner, either drawing or writing, and we'd find scraps of paper along with drawings, writing, and little Playmobil and things in the corner. But she was the one underneath the family, I think, as she described it, always kind of recording what we were doing without us quite knowing it. She was a gift to our family the way she did that. But writing was always a part of Rachel's life, and we always treasured that. When she was killed, she had written to our family, mostly to Cindy, but then we spread it out to the family, all these powerful email that came back from Gaza, and a cousin of mine, just an hour or so after we heard the news that Rachel was killed, called, and Cindy said to him, we have to get her email out, we have to get her writing out. And it was just really, I think, a matter of hours, but maybe a day after that we heard that the Guardian newspaper was going to do an article on Rachel and would like some of her writing from which to take maybe a few quotes or something like that. And we sent off this stack of email electronically, and about a day after that, we got back an email from their editor saying, this is some of the most personal and powerful writing we've seen about Gaza in years. We decided just to simply publish Rachel's email rather than an article about her, but let her speak for herself. And that really started a chain of events that ended up in this book. A friend of the British actor Alan Rickman, a friend of his, was reading The Guardian that day and handed it to Alan and said, read this. And Alan picked it up, and he was working with the Royal Court Theatre, and he took it down there, and he says, we need to work with this. We need to see if there's something we can do theatrically to work with this ride on every continent of the world except Antarctica. We don't have any plans to put it in Antarctica, but we can work on it, you know. So with that, the writing came out, and some of you may know it sort of faltered as coming to New York, but did come in the fall then of 2006. But in the spring, when the New York Theater Workshop kind of backed out of it, then a group sprang up called Rachel's Words, and they were having people read her email, which were available while the play was not, instead of the play, and that started another circle of Rachel's Words going. So in the middle of all that, I think it was Catherine Viner and Alan Rickman who first said, you need to take this work that we're reading and put it into a book rather than having the edited parts out into a play. People need to be able to see what Rachel first wrote. So we tackled that, and luckily Sarah really put it all together. Most of this book is really due to Sarah getting it done, but I'm happy to take credit for it anyhow. And so, words were always precious to Rachel, and I remember, like I say, even at an early age, I remember taking her to school when she was in 5th grade. To my office when she was in 5th grade, about 10 years old. And adults always ask the kids the same obnoxious question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so a friend of mine says to Rachel, what do you want to be when you grow up? And Rachel stared him right back in the eye and said, I am a poet. So words were precious to Rachel, and her words have been a treasure to our family, and a gift to us. And with this book, we make that gift to you. So thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming out. It's wonderful to see this room.
So the Royal Court Theatre got a hold of our family, and of course we had no idea what was going on, but they made contact with us. We talked to them about 6 months later, actually, on our way back from Israel and Palestine, the first time we were over there. And I talked with Alan Rickman, who was part of the group, and others there that I don't really remember now. And I didn't, actually, it's kind of funny, because we got done with that talking, and in that I said, Rachel is a writer all of her life. It's not just the emails from Gaza, but would you be interested in any of her other writing? And Alan said, yeah, he would be. But we got done with that meeting, and we got outside, and I said to Cindy, we're supposed to know the actor with a deep voice. And then a couple hours later, I said, Sense and Sensibility, he's insane. And of course, he's got this long list of both theater and movie credits. But it was Alan, and then an editor of The Guardian, a different editor, Catherine Viner, that first edited Rachel's work and made the play My Name is Rachel Corrie, which is now playing in several places around the United States and in Canada, and I'm not sure where else all over the world, but a few weeks ago it opened in Arabic in Haifa by a Palestinian Israeli, and she did it very powerfully, and Cindy and I were just there, just came back about a week ago from seeing that play, and it was amazing. In fact, some people from the Royal Court came to watch that, including Catherine Viner, like I say, one of the original editors, Elise Dodson, who worked on it as their international producer, and then the first person to play Rachel, Megan Dodds, was there. And so Megan came to see this Palestinian Rachel. And then a young woman from Iceland came, and she's working on a translation into Icelandic, and she wanted to see Israel. So it's kind of amazing. I tell people I really think it will play this year. Thank you, and thank Powell's and Portland for having us here. It's really an extraordinary pleasure to be here tonight and among friends. Last night we were doing the same sort of thing at Evergreen State College and looking around the group, and of course that was Rachel's college. And I thought back last night to 29 years prior to that when we were sitting around our home with friends at a party, and the party got quieter and more quiet because everybody was timing Cindy's contractions. And 29 days and about, I don't know, 14 hours. 29 years and 14 hours ago, Rachel was born. So this is her birthday. She'd be 29 years old today.
Thank you for being here for the birthday party.
And you know,